those are the 32 teams not participating this upcoming weekend. A ton of MAC schools not playing. I think it's a total of 9 teams not playing in the MAC. But as we always do for these quick picks, we start in Conference USA. Tuesday we had a game. We talked about that also on Monday's show. Kennesaw State beat UTEP already. And another one we already got right. Just like last week, we are starting off pretty hot. We're actually 2-0. We'll talk about the Sunbelt game here in a little bit. But Kennesaw State at the top of the conference at the moment for CUSA. And we'll talk about them in a little bit also in the news section. But moving on to some games that haven't occurred and are actually kicking off today, and that's Jacksonville State heading over to Middle Tennessee. We are definitely taking the Cocks, and I mean Gamecocks, as they have been one of the best teams in the conference last year, the champions. This season, a little bit of an up and down, especially in the beginning of the year. But up against Middle Tennessee, yeah, they are definitely the favorites, not only to pick, also in the betting market. They are 4-point favorites. I think that's a little bit of a slap in the face to the Gamecocks because they are heads and toe better than the Raiders of Middle Tennessee. So yeah, that's why we're going to go Jacksonville State. Moving on to the other Wednesday game, that is Missouri State hosting FIU. Florida International has just been a random team this season. Earlier this year, they played FAU. We went with the Owls. We got that one wrong. The Panthers won. They shootable. And then there's been games in conference so far this season where they have just been outclassed. Up-and-comers, Delaware, did the business to them in the 305. Them on the road here in Missouri. Yeah, I think we're going to take Missouri State. They have been a little bit more consistent. And also favored by 4 points there at home. So there's another good reason of why we're picking them for today on Wednesday. Moving on to a Friday game between Sam Houston State and Louisiana Tech. The Bulldogs are favored by 17 points, and for good reason. The Bearcats of Sam Houston State haven't won a game this season so far, and they will most likely continue to be winless, as it's not been a good year here in 2025 for the Bearcats. I think there's some good news. Their starting quarterback from the beginning of the season that went down, I'm forgetting his last name off the top of my head. He is slated to be returning. I don't think he's going to be much of a difference. Louisiana Tech has been pretty good in conference play so far. So yeah, let's go La Tech. We keep moving to Delaware, heading down to Lynchburg, Virginia to take on Liberty, as we have some CUSA games on Saturday for the first time in a while. We're going to go with the Blue Hens in this little bird fight between them and the Flames, who are favored by 3.5 points. I just like Delaware at the moment. They have been punching above their weight, the new boys here in the FBS, as it seems like a lot of the new teams in Conference USA have been dealing the business. You got Kennesaw State in first place. They just joined the conference last season. Missouri State has been winning games here and there. And the other, obviously, new boy that we're talking about here, the Blue Hens, have also, again, punched above their weight. Will they do it? I think so. We're going to take them on the road. Again, they are not favored. And Liberty, 3.5 points. It's going to be an interesting one. One I'm probably not going to tune into, unfortunately, because there's going to be a hell of a lot more games. I wish this one was more on a weeknight, because out of all of these matchups, that's the kind of game I'm more interested in. It's unfortunate that it's going to be on Saturday. But we keep moving as we pick Delaware there. We have New Mexico State heading over to Bowling Green, Kentucky to take on the Hilltoppers. We're definitely going to take Western Kentucky, hands down. I think there's also some good news we're going to talk about in the news section for their starting quarterback. But also, yeah, Western Kentucky, we saw it there in the top 10 plays. Actually, no, I think it's in our intro, if I'm not mistaken. That onside kick that was returned from Henry, who was in the hands team for that situation. Their best player out wide should be exposing New Mexico State pretty well. And yeah, we should see the Hilltoppers win this one. They're also favored by 8.5 points at the moment. So yeah, let's go Western Kentucky, as that'll round up the Conference USA games. And we only have 2 Mid-American games to talk about. Yes, most of the conference is on a bye week, and there's only 4 teams competing here in week 10. It's very awkward there in the Mid-American. We start with Buffalo taking on Bowling Green. I think this is one of the hardest games to pick. Buffalo last week, well, they dropped a game. And Bowling Green has also been dropping games, but they've also been winning games, surprisingly. Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken, beat UConn. And then Bowling Green beat Toledo earlier this year for the battle for the I-75. So yeah, it's a little bit of a nice coin toss on top of that. When you look at the lines being set for this game, Bowling Green's favored by 2 points, so it should be a close affair, as the heads over in Vegas kind of on it. But at the end of the day, I think I have to go Bowling Green. They're at home. They usually play all right there. And then Buffalo going all the way to the state of Ohio for this one. Maybe the travel also affects them as well. But it won't be surprised if the Bulls pull off a win here. But we're going to go Falcons. The other game in the MAC to talk about is Western Michigan hosting Central Michigan. So we have a nice Michigan on Michigan matchup. I think it was a couple weeks ago. Central Michigan beat Eastern Michigan. Is that we're saying Michigan a lot with some northwest direction. Yeah, I think I'm going to go Western Michigan. The Broncos should be bouncing back. A tough loss to Miami of Ohio. At that point, before that game started, Western Michigan was undefeated in conference play. So they're a bit on a roll there, especially in the MAC. Central Michigan, though, they could sneak this game. It is on the road, though. I think the Broncos will ultimately win. On top of that, they're favored by 4.5 points. So I think that's also why we're also going to go with Western Michigan. Just a lot going in their favor. And yeah, as those are the MAC games to talk about. Only 2. Most of the teams will return next weekend. As we now dip into the Sunbelt Funbelt Tuesday game that occurred that we talked about on Monday that I mentioned. James Madison heading to San Marcos, Texas to take on Texas State. They beat the Bobcats 52-20. There's a lot of chatter online since the result of this game of James Madison now being the favorite out of the group of 6 to represent all those conferences in the college football playoff. I am just not buying it. I absolutely disagree with all of that chatter. The American is heads and toe better than the Sunbelt Funbelt. I love me some Sunbelt football, but when it comes up against that conference, there's no way in hell that James Madison gets in, to be quite honest with you, even with one loss, just being to Louisville, which was a pretty close affair. But again, at the end of the day, the American, you have USF, Memphis, Navy is still undefeated, which might not be for much longer. North Texas, I believe I'm missing a team off the top of my head there that's still like a 1-loss program. Yeah, the competition is not even close. On top of that, I think it's kind of an inflated win between them and Texas State, who is pretty high on like the ESPN FBI, but what does that all even mean? And on top of that, Bobcats haven't even won a conference game this season so far. I think it's a little too hype so far for the Dukes, even though I love James Madison. Back in the day when I played NCAA 06, some of the later ones after that, I was putting the Dukes in the FBS as that was one of my favorite programs. You got to love the mascot. But here in 2025, yeah, I think they're going to definitely fall short just because of the strength of schedule. that they have here in the Sunbelt. But who knows? Who knows? I could be wrong. Marshall, as we ranted and raved about James Madison possibly making the college football playoff. A Thursday matchup between, again, Marshall and Coastal Carolina. They're on Myrtle Beach. A beautiful location. Love the field. Almost similar to what the background actually looks like. We're going to go with the Thundering Herd. I think this is a very difficult game to pick. I think it's probably the hardest one out of all of the Sunbelt games to lay down on who we want to win and who we think are going to win. I kind of want Marshall to win because they've been decent. It was an impressive victory over Old Dominion about a couple weeks ago as they handled business against the Monarchs. Here on the road, it might be a little tricky. Last week, we did not pick Coastal Carolina against Appalachian State, and we're disappointed. The Mountaineers losing there at home in Boone. But here against Marshall, who are technically the conference champions from last season, as the remnants of that winning team has basically moved on to Southern Miss, as it was a mass exodus. Didn't even show up for their bowl game that were supposed to play. But yeah, Marshall, I think, are going to win this, but will not be surprised if Coastal Carolina pulls out the victory at home. The Thundering Herd are favored by 5.5 points. As we move on to Old Dominion, heading down south to UL Monroe. Warhawks lost last week. They're probably going to lose again. Old Dominion, probably like the number 2-3 team in the conference. That's why we're going to go Monarchs. And on top of that, they have a massive line that's in favor for Old Dominion. 17 points for the Monarchs. So when you see a line like that, you're like, okay, yeah, there's no way we're picking UL Monroe. There's very few double digits lines that I would go up against, even though we will have one here to talk about on the stream later. We keep moving to the Raging Cajun versus South Alabama after we pick Old Dominion there. Another tough one to call. Both teams have been somewhat inconsistent. Some so far this season where we picked them, we got it wrong. I think we're going to get it right. We're going to go with Jags. I think last week we got our pick right for South Alabama. And I think we're going to get it right again. UL Lafayette, yeah, they have just been competitive in games, but usually fall short, I would say, on the road so far this season. And I think they're going to fall again there in South Alabama. So let's go Jags. The last game to talk about here in the Sunbelt Funbelt, we got Arkansas State heading over to Troy. Troy, I would say, is leading in terms of favorability to win the West in the conference. But they will have a very good Red Wolves team coming into town. Troy is favored by 7.5 points, but that's not why we're kind of picking the Trojans. They have been on a decent streak, and I think it continues this upcoming weekend against Arkansas State. So yeah, let's go Troy, as they definitely want to be in pole position to most likely face James Madison later this season for the Sunbelt Championship. So that's the Sunbelt Funbelt, as we keep moving now to the Mountain West. So we got to go to the West Coast a little bit. Talk about a game we're going to be discussing twice here on the stream, as it's in multiple sections. So let's do it in the Mountain West one first. We got Air Force hosting Army. A game between two military academies. Earlier this season, Air Force played Navy. The midshipmen beat the Falcons pretty handily there in Annapolis. This one over in Colorado. If I'm not mistaken, last time Army came to town, they spoiled Air Force's undefeated season, as that was the first one the Falcons had back in 2023. Here in 2025, Army back on the road, who are favored by just 1 point. Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting matchup. I'm probably going to be switching back and forth to this game, or maybe have it on a separate screen, as the military academy games are just super entertaining. For me, I don't know about you, as yeah, I think we're gonna go with Air Force. I think they want a bit of revenge from the last time Army came to town. Then on top of that, usually I would say, like, I feel like the favorite team sometimes loses, and with the margin being so slim, I think Air Force versus Navy was a little bit bigger in difference and in favor of the midshipmen. This one with an away team, yeah, I just don't see it happening. And then on top of that, the last time they actually played, it was back at Mile High Stadium. For this one, it should be, if I'm not mistaken, back on campus for Air Force. So yeah, that's why we're also going to go with the Falcons, who need this win more than Army as well. And then on top of that, getting one over your rival means a hell of a lot more. So yeah, let's go Air Force. This one we're going against the grain, and I believe it's the first one on stream to mention. Oh no, actually no, it's Delaware Liberty was the other one. UNLV, well, they're hosting New Mexico. Both teams pretty decent so far here in 2025. New Mexico on track to be bowl eligible pretty soon. UNLV on the other hand, only one loss this season to Boise State there in Idaho a couple of weekends ago. They had a nice bye this past week, so they should be more than refreshed to handle the Lobos, I think, there in Vegas. They're also favored by 4 points. I think it'll be a nice back and forth game, maybe where we see UNLV, as they have been trending this season, dig themselves into a hole and then figure out how to dig themselves out of that hole in the second half. So yeah, let's go UNLV with a nice home win and try to get back into the race to possibly have a rematch against Boise State at the end of the season. The next one up is, I think it's a battle for like some kind of milk canister. I'm not like too crazy on the trophy that is up for grabs against Fresno State, as if you know and are like, why is the room blue? Well, there's a reason why. Is that you see my piece of blue turf there. I haven't played Fresno State in a year, and the last 2 meetings between Boise State and Fresno State, it has gone the Bulldogs' way, both in Boise and in the Valley. So that's a very big game, I think, for the Broncos to obviously return that canister back into the state of Idaho. And then on top of that, you want to be in pole position to be playing for a Mountain West title and possibly getting back to the college football playoff, as there's a lot of other variables that need to fall for that to happen for the Broncos. And then on top of all that, Fresno State is starting a new quarterback, and I think it has been changed in the last game as they were shut out against San Diego State. I don't think they're going to get shut out this upcoming weekend. Boise defense has been pretty leaky at times, but at the end of the day, they should have a nice multiple possession win. Boise is favored by 17 points in this rivalry game. But yeah, we're definitely never going to not pick the Broncos. So yeah, let's go Boise. Washington State versus Oregon State. I know this is not a Mountain West game. We just moved it over here to this section as there's only 2 teams currently in the Pac-12. It's a very odd situation here in 2025 between the Cougs and the Beavers. They'll be playing twice. I don't know the last time 2 teams have played each other twice in the regular season. I know it happens in the regular season, and then they might meet up back again in the conference championship game, but for this to happen in the regular season, it's again a little weird. It's only going to happen here in 2025, and then the next season there'll be some new teams in the Pac-12. But for this game in Corvallis, Washington State is favored by 3.5 points. I think that's pretty valid. Maybe it should be a little bit more. Oregon State has only beaten 1 team so far this season, and that was an FCS opponent, Lafayette, a couple of weekends ago. So coming up against Washington State, definitely want to win this game. They're definitely more than far away from being bowl eligible whatsoever. So it's kind of more or less like for pride for the Beavers. But I think at the end of the day, Washington State has been the better team. They beat San Diego State. They took Ole Miss and Virginia to their limits. So yeah, I think they're a little bit better of a team at the moment. Then on top of that, Oregon State has already gotten rid of a few members of their coaching staff so far this season. So that also would not favor, I think, the Beavers as well. So that's why we're going to go Washington State there in Corvallis. We keep moving to Wyoming, heading down to sunny Southern California to take on San Diego State. Wyoming, they won the border war last week against Colorado State. They shut out the Rams 28-0. San Diego State also shut out their week 9 opponents in Fresno State. I'm forgetting the score off the top of my head, but it was a big old goose egg for the Bulldogs there. So two teams coming off of dominant performances. San Diego State, I would say, is a little bit better. Not by much, to be quite honest with you. Wyoming, they stumbled at home to UNLV in the snow. Yeah, our first snow game, I think it was back in week 6. And have been picking up some speed here in conference play. But when it comes up against, I think, the Aztecs, who I think are very good at making their opponents make mistakes, especially on defense, where they have been scoring quite a few points here in 2025, and I think that might be the difference. But we'll have to see. Wyoming has a pretty good running back as well that should have a decent game for the Cowboys and should offer San Diego State's defense some trouble there on the ground. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to have to go Aztecs. They're 10-point favorites. I think this game's going to be a little closer than that, to be quite honest with you. I don't think they win by multiple possessions, but I do think San Diego State wins. The final game, a nice nightcap contest to round out the Mountain West Games. Unfortunately, not in Honolulu, Hawaii. This one is in Northern California. Therefore, Hawaii at San Diego. Oh, not San Diego State, San Jose State. A very interesting game, I think. Hawaii, they're bowl eligible. San Jose State, they need to win a few more to get in that position. And then on top of that, I mean, there's two just electric players on either side of the field. You got Michael Alejandro for the Rainbow Warriors, for the Spartans. Scudero, I think that's his last name, leading the nation in receiving yards. So you have very impactful players there in offense. It's really just going to come down to the defense between the two. And I think Michael Alejandro is just a little bit more effective. He just is really good at finding good spots for his wide receivers to get him the ball. If he can get some help there in the running game, that would be nice, but most likely it doesn't happen. We've seen Hawaii kind of be bad at that this season. But San Jose State, you know, they played Stanford pretty well. They did lose to Central Michigan earlier this season. I think that's probably why they lose this game. They just find ways to shoot themselves in the foot. They are favorites in this game, 2.5 points for the Spartans. So this is one where we're going against the grain. And yeah, give us some Rainbow Warriors. As we keep moving now into the American Thursday night game between Tulane and UTSA there in San Antonio. Number 14 here at your Sports Outpost, Green Waves, as they have been surging in our polls, especially Memphis beating USF. Kind of puts them in a nice position to get into that conference championship game. They still have to play Memphis, but their test this weekend is the Roadrunners. They're on the road. UTSA has been all right. They've been losing games here and there. I was very disappointed. I think it was a couple weeks ago. I'm forgetting who they... Oh, it was Temple on the road there in Philly. So a little bit of inconsistencies. For Tulane, this is kind of a game that's just got to keep rolling. Retzlaff has been all right. He's been a pretty good fit there in New Orleans. I think this is going to kind of be the case that we've been seeing the last couple of weeks, where it's just been a close matchup for Tulane. I remember a couple weeks ago they barely survived at home against East Carolina, and I think we're going to get kind of similar vibes here for Week 10. They're favored by 4.5 points, so there's another reason why we're going to go with Tulane. But I think UTSA definitely tests them, but at the end of the day, they lose. We keep moving to Memphis on the road there in Houston, Texas to take on Rice. Now, I'm very worried for Memphis on the road because it was 2 weeks ago they lost to UAB in Birmingham, a very bad UAB, a Blaze team that just lost their head coach as well. Rice hasn't fired their head coach, not that I know of. Don't even know who that is off the top of my head. But Memphis, with the performance that they had last week, coming back, overcoming the Bulls of South Florida, who's just, one of the best teams in the conference, a top 25 team in the country, I think, especially at your Sports Outpost. We have them there at number 24. Memphis should be getting the job done here. They should not fumble this opportunity of getting themselves back into a championship opportunity. That game against Tulane, maybe either of the Tigers or Green Wave are looking ahead, could possibly fall this weekend, but I don't think so. This game has the least likely thing for Memphis to lose. They're favored by multiple possessions, 14 points in total, and that should be the end result. If not, I'm going to be a little worried for Memphis going into that game against Tulane, but we're going to go with the Tigers there. UAB is heading up to the northeast of the country to take on UConn. Huskies are favored by 11.5 points against the Blaze. I think that's a little misleading. UAB, they beat Memphis. And then on top of that, UConn has been losing to lesser foes this season. Still going to pick the Huskies because it is an interesting trip. Birmingham, Alabama. I think it's like Bristol, Connecticut is at least near where this game is going to be. And UConn, Boston College win a couple weeks ago. I think they've been pretty decent. I think Mora also wants to get into a bowl. That this is kind of a must win as well. So at the end of the season, as the race is finishing, the Huskies definitely want to qualify. And go bowling. So yeah, that's why we're also going with UConn there. Again, we already talked about it on the stream. Army heading over to Air Force. For some reason on this graphic I have Army on there. I'll have to fix it in the clips. Should be on Air Force. That's who we're going with. Not to be misleading here live, as the other graphic had it over on the Falcons. We're gonna pick the home team. We talked a little bit about it already. So yeah, let's keep moving to North Texas. Hosting Navy. This is probably the game of the week. The American has been having some pretty spicy matchups the last couple of weeks. Last weekend, it was USF versus Memphis. This one in Denton, Texas, it is the Midshipmen taking on the Mean Green. And yeah, we're going to go against a ranked team. It doesn't happen very often. It's happening right now as we're picking North Texas, who has been rising in terms of favorability to win this. I think it started at the week at 4.5 points for North Texas. Now for the Mean Green, it's now 6.5 points, so almost a full touchdown is what everyone is thinking who's putting money on this game. I think it's pretty interesting. For Navy, the Midshipmen need to get up early. Obviously, that's easier said than done against North Texas. But last week against Charlotte, I was very surprised as I was kind of going through our top 10 plays. That means I get to see some different games. North Texas versus the 49ers was actually an interesting matchup in the beginning of that contest. The Mean Green were down. That game was on the road though, so it might have been a little bit of travel affecting North Texas, but they kicked it back into gear and then completely outran Charlotte there at the end. Here against Navy, they got to take advantage of those kind of mistakes that North Texas can have. They throw the ball quite a bit. It's an air raid offense. In fact, it's the highest scoring offense in the country. So that's also why we're picking North Texas. But if Navy wants to win this game, those are some of the things they need to do. And at the end of the day, I think, the midshipmen fall for the first time here in 2025. And it could put North Texas in the rankings after this weekend. We keep moving to East Carolina, heading to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to take on Temple. Two teams that could definitely be go bowling by the end of the season. Temple, they have been pretty close against some teams that are definitely better than them. A couple weeks ago, they almost handed Navy their first loss when the midshipmen visited them there at Lincoln Stadium. But for East Carolina, I think they're a little bit better. They have definitely lost some games this season, but I've been pretty impressed with the way they get the job done. They're in the first half for most of the games that they have won. The game against Army on a weeknight, I think that was in like week 7. They just handled the Black Knights, and I think they're going to be able to handle Temple here on the road. A little worried about this pick because I feel like when, at least in the American, when these conference games happen, they're in Philly. Sometimes the teams do slip up. I don't think it's going to happen. It did happen to UTSA, who's in and around the same level as the Pirates. But I think East Carolina gets the job done. Is that we keep moving now into the ACC. North Carolina heads up to the Dome to take on Syracuse. This is a Friday night game, and another one where if you go conference by conference, I think this is the hardest one to pick because both teams have not been good here in 2025. North Carolina, last week they did a pretty good job in almost beating Virginia, a ranked team, took them to overtime for the Cavaliers to win in Chapel Hill. This time they're on the road against the Orange, who have not been themselves since the win against Clemson back in like week 4 or 5. For Syracuse, I don't really understand why they're favorites. Kind of makes a little bit less sense because of the offensive firepower. But they're coming up against North Carolina, so being favored by 2 points kind of makes sense. I think this is going to be a very low scoring game. And I think Syracuse's defense is kind of the difference. Gio Lopez has not really worked out whatsoever there for the Tar Heels. Kind of indecisive in his decision making, it feels like. And I think ultimately that's the reason why North Carolina loses. Maybe make a quarterback switch, if not before this game, to Max Johnson. But I think at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. But this should be one of the most entertaining games for the Atlantic Coast, or maybe even for the weekend, even with not many points being scored. But at the end of the day, we're going to go Syracuse. One, we are going against the grain, and that is Miami heading over to Dallas, Texas to take on SMU. Miami blew out Stanford last week at home. And for the first time this season, they head out of their home state of Florida to go all the way to Texas to play the Ponies. That's kind of also the reason why we're going with SMU. I think it's also a very similar team in terms of like roster build to Louisville. Pretty decent quarterback. They have some pretty solid running backs. I don't think they're as good as the Cardinals. Offensive line, pretty solid as well. Defensively, they can offer a lot and giving Miami some trouble. And it could be a game where Carson Beck just doesn't come in fully focused. Not that he's overlooking SMU whatsoever, because they are still somewhat in the running to go back to the ACC championship game, even after that loss to Wake Forest. Only one loss in the conference, so it's definitely a must-win game for Rhett Lashley. And yeah, I think Miami, at the end of the day, coming out of the state of Florida, a little slow start. I could be wrong about this game as well. Miami is favored by 12 points, but I think SMU gets the job done and hands Miami another loss in the conference, as I think that's pretty realistic. Clemson host Duke. This should be a great game also to tune into. Blue Devils should be giving the Tigers some trouble. Don't know how this game is going to crack on in terms of like the score difference. At the moment, it is 3.5 points in favor for the home team. I think that's pretty interesting. If Clemson was how everyone thought Clemson was going to be this season, definitely would be a hell of a lot more. But I think the question is going to be on the offense, scoring enough points to put Duke away. And Duke's been all right. You know, a couple weeks ago, you know, had a decent performance against Georgia Tech. So it's a very doable win, I think, for the Blue Devils, especially for a wounded Tiger there in South Carolina. But I think we're going to go Clemson. I actually don't think they cover. I think it's going to be a 1 or 2 point difference for the scoreline. But I do think Clemson wins. We get moving to Louisville on the road there in Blacksburg, Virginia, to take on the Hokies of Virginia Tech. 10-point line in favor for the Cardinals. I think that's pretty interesting. Virginia Tech beat Cal in that comeback win at home. I think that was on a Friday night. So I think they also have an extra day to get ready for this game. Louisville, if I'm not mistaken, last week played at home. Who did they play home to? I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it might have been maybe Duke. I got the win there at the end of the day, and I think they do it here as well. Virginia Tech, I think this is just a game they drop. Definitely want to win this because they want to be bowl eligible. But I think Louisville and that running game will be able to expose the Hokies. Miller Moss connecting to some targets as well. But we'll see. Should be closer than the lines being set. 10 points for the Cardinals. I actually don't think Louisville covers there. As I would keep moving to the Lehigh Bowl between Notre Dame and Boston College. I think that's what it's called. Regardless, this is going to most likely be a blowout for the Fighting Irish there in Chestnut Hill. Bill O'Brien, I've been seeing a lot of list of coaches being in hot seats, odds for firings. I'm surprised to not see his name in the mix whatsoever. But it doesn't really matter because I don't think Boston College can really hire anyone that's going to really change the program to be winnable in the near future. So that's probably why he's also not on that list. Notre Dame is favored by 28.5 points. So yeah, I don't know if they're not going to cover that. I think this is going to be an absolute obliteration there for BC. So yeah, let's go Irish. Pitt, they are on the West Coast. And yeah, usually this season so far, when an East Coast team or Midwest team heads over to, again, the West Coast, they have been losing. And even to have like games that are favored for those East Coast teams by large margins have been proven wrong. A couple weekends ago, Florida State headed over to Palo Alto and lost to the Cardinal. And I think that's a similar vibe we have here for Pitt. I do like their quarterback switch that they did a couple weekends ago. I think just like the travel for the East Coast teams, I think that's actually really affecting them in terms of performing. This game is also closer to, I guess, an afternoon kickoff technically. I think it's more at 12:30. So we'll see if the Panthers are affected. I think Stanford wins. So yeah, we're going to go with the Cardinal. Even though Pitt is favored by 14 points, which is pretty interesting. We keep moving to Virginia, also heading to the West Coast, this time to Berkeley, California to take on Cal. This one we are not going to be picking the West Coast team, even though we just came up with that whole rigmarole of why we're picking Stanford. I think Virginia is a better team than Pitt. They should be holding up their own there against the Berkeley Bears. They're only favored by 4 points, which is pretty interesting, as we kind of compare the Pitt-Stanford game. But yeah, let's go Cavaliers. Georgia Tech, they are heading to Raleigh, North Carolina. This might be a tricky game for the Yellow Jackets. Maybe their first loss of the season. The Wolfpack took Pitt to their limits last week. They did beat Virginia earlier this season, so they have a decent performance in them. Just got to put it all together, obviously. And Georgia Tech has been struggling against lesser opponents. I can remember that Wake Forest game where they barely got out alive on the road. So it's similar kind of vibes, I feel. They are favored by 5.5 points. So things look pretty good, I think, on paper at the moment for Georgia Tech. But I will not be surprised if they do lose here in Raleigh. The last game to talk about here in the Atlantic Coast Conference is between Wake Forest heading down to Tallahassee to take on Florida State. 9.5 point favorites for the Seminoles. I think that's warranted somewhat. They have not won a conference game, though, on the other hand, since 2023? No, actually, no, last year they won one game, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they've been pretty bad in conference under Norvell the last 2 seasons. I'm a little worried that if they do win this game, it kind of allows Norvell to stay there, because I just don't think he's the man for the job there in Tallahassee whatsoever. Here against Wake Forest, they beat SMU last week. They've been taking teams to the limit that we just talked about for Georgia Tech. Could be the case here, but I think at the end of the day, Florida State probably wins by around, that 9.5 point difference. So yeah, let's go Florida State. As before we conclude the Atlantic Coast Conference, I think this is going to be my, if we get the most games wrong for any conference, I think it's going to be this section. I know we're kind of risking it with the Stanford Pitt game, SMU Miami. I think the Syracuse North Carolina game can go either way. Clemson could easily lose to Duke. And then we already talked about Georgia Tech possibly getting upsetted there in Raleigh. I think even Virginia Tech could make it a game against Louisville, to where like all of our picks can be completely wrong here for the ACC. As we keep moving now to the Big 12, one of my favorite conferences to discuss. As the Clips have been doing pretty well over on YT whenever we talk about this conference. Houston, well, they are hosting West Virginia. And yeah, we're going to pick the Cougs. They are ranked for the first time ever here at your Sports Outpost. So hopefully they don't ruin that as well. They're favored by 13.5 points as they come up against the second worst team, I think, in the Big 12. Also winless in conference, and I think they're going to continue to be winless, unfortunately, in the first year for Rich Rod being back there in Morgantown. So yeah, let's go Houston. Also, Connor Wegman been pretty good so far this season, as he has found some new life there in H-Town. UCF heads over to Waco, Texas, take on Baylor. This is probably the hardest game to pick. I think maybe it's that and the Arizona Colorado game. Between Baylor and Central Florida, though, I think the Bears win this. I think they're a little bit better. The defense definitely stinks there in Waco. But offensively, they have some just studs. Sawyer Robertson, tight end Trigg. I was going to say Pendergrass, but he's been out since the beginning of the year. I'm forgetting the Washington, I believe, is the other running back for the Baylor Bears. Also a pretty solid guy there. So I think at the end of the day, yeah, that's the reason why they win. It was very disappointing not to see a closer game in Cincinnati last week against the Bearcats. But this should be a very close affair between the two. And I think Baylor wins, who are favored by 4 points. Iowa State hosts Arizona State there at Ames, a game I thought would have been a high-profile matchup. Looking at it from the off-season's perspective, turns out not to be that, as both teams have been falling in conference as of late, especially the last week. Arizona State loses to Houston. Iowa State lost at home to BYU. The Cyclones are favored by 7.5 points. Could be possible. I think the news of some injuries we're going to talk about in the news section at the end of the stream is probably why that difference has actually been rising. I think it started at like 4.5 points in favor of Iowa State. It has now risen to 7.5. And then on top of that, Rocco Beck, I think, is going to deliver here as well. It's a little disappointed for the Cyclones this season. I thought they could have been a hell of a lot better, but have fallen, especially coming off that Iowa win. But there's been some injuries throughout this season of why they've been losing games, like the one against Cincinnati. I don't think there has been any returns for that BYU game for their secondary, so that's also probably why they lost last week as well. But at the end of the day, Iowa State wins there in Ames. Beats another Arizona school at home. Texas Tech, they head over to Manhattan, Kansas to take on Kansas State. The Big 12 has kind of been hyping this game up over on social media, as I believe it's the 30th anniversary of the conference, and I guess they're kind of showcasing that for this one between the Wildcats and Red Raiders. Texas Tech, number 10 here at your Sports Outpost. Only loss is there in Tempe with a backup quarterback who suffered an injury last week against Oklahoma State. But the good news is the Red Raiders quarterback that started this season, Baron Morton, should be ready to go against Kansas State. I think the bigger question isn't going to be for him. It's going to be the Red Raider defense and stopping Avery Johnson, who had an excellent game in the Sunflower Showdown last week against Kansas. So if he can expose the Red Raiders defense, and then on top of that, hit his favorite target, Jance Brown, big play Brown, Kansas State could give Texas Tech some trouble, but I think I got to go Red Raiders. Again, Barrett Morton's going to be back. Defense pretty solid. I think they will be able to figure out the Avery Johnson equation. And also, Tech is favored by 7 points. So yeah, let's go Red Raiders there. As we keep moving to two very disappointing programs in the Big 12, I would say. Oklahoma State, who has been hot garbage, winless so far this season in conference, and then on top of that, their only win, I think, is to an FCS opponent. They have just been losing games. Kansas, on the other hand, also been losing games. We've been getting it right when they come up against some pretty bad teams. West Virginia, You got to give them some credit there. They beat the Mountaineers. Here against Oklahoma State, I think they get kind of lucky, as they should be bouncing back against the Cowpokes there at home. I'm kind of surprised though. They got blown out last week, but they're expected to blow out Oklahoma State. I know everyone has been doing that in conference so far this season, as the Jayhawks are favored by 25 points. But yeah, we'll see if they cover. I know everyone's been kind of pitting up like 30 plus points against Oklahoma State. We'll see if Kansas can do that. But Jayhawks should be winning that, and that's why we're picking them. Arizona heads up to Boulder, Colorado to take on the Primetime Puffs, who had a bad outing in Salt Lake City last week. Arizona, I believe, had a nice bye week, so they had a decent amount of time to prepare for this one. Colorado, they had a bye week going into that game against Utah, and it looked like they didn't prepare for that game. I saw the halftime speech that Coach Prime gave in that contest against Utah. Now, that should be the things he should be saying for Colorado when he goes into games. Talking about not taking plays off on defense, getting to the ball, even if you're not even close to the whistle, staying off your phone, not being, focused on your social media for, the game that you are actually playing in. Just some interesting things that I like. Why is he not saying this in the beginning of the game? It's kind of very disappointing to see clips like that come out of the Colorado locker room and being like, man, what is going on over there? But it seems like it's more or less like the coaching hires that he has in positions, or for position coaches that seem like are not going to be working out, and he's going to have to make another overhaul change there in Boulder. I think he stays there also in Colorado. I don't think there's any of these high profile openings that will be available in the offseason. I just don't think he has the stuff to kind of make it as one of those major programs at the moment. It kind of seems like the success he's had was because of, your Travis Hunters, your Shedeur Sanders and company that he had last season that he's not been able to replicate. And I kind of was already questioning the Kaden Salter quarterback move. I was like, he kind of doesn't fit the offense that they've had the last couple of seasons. And I was like, okay, well, looks like I was a little bit right about that. And then on top of that, I'm like, why hasn't he not made the change to Juju Lewis? It's like, give the young kid an opportunity. He chose Colorado over USC for a reason. It's like, just put him in already. I kind of don't care if he's quote unquote not ready. The kid got to get some experience. Maybe he will get it against the Wildcats, who I think will win this game. Noah Fafita should be more than ready to go against Colorado. They have been all right. They've been beating some, I think, better teams than Colorado over the season. They beat Kansas State. They did get blown out earlier this season to Iowa State. But yeah, the Wildcats. They, I don't think it's gonna be a blowout like last week for that scoreline that Colorado had against Utah. But it should be multiple possessions. The Wildcats are favored by 4.5 points, and I think they'll more than likely bear down there in Boulder. The final game to talk about in the Big 12 is Cincinnati heading over to Salt Lake City. Game day will be there between the Bearcats and the Utes. We don't have the Utah Utes ranked. I was actually over in the chats for Degen Takes questioning Choo Choo, the Money Train Noah, in ranking Utah, and not only ranking Utah but ranking them pretty highly. I was like, well, who have they beaten this season? I guess you can count UCLA, but UCLA's been pretty bad. I mean, they got blown out also by New Mexico. I really can't find a win that is kind of impressive. Some people can mention Arizona State, but I'm like, well, they didn't have Sam Levitt, so who did you really beat? Sam Levitt not in the Arizona State lineup kind of just isn't that much of an impressive win. So yeah, for me, I'm like, it's a little interesting. For Cincinnati, though, on the other hand, they have been pretty good. They handed Baylor a massive L last week. They could have blown out Iowa State at home as well. That game came a little close for the Cyclones, and that comeback fail. The game against Nebraska, I mean, it unfortunately didn't go their way there in Arrowhead. So that's why I'm kind of interested. I'm like, why is this game being so like hyped up for Utah? Because they're favored by 9 points, and it has been rising since the beginning of the week. Kind of like, is there no respect for Cincinnati in this game? 7 points in the beginning of the week, and then now has risen up to 9. I know it's very hard to win there at Sam Eccles, but come on. I mean, it's Cincinnati. They have been on their resume a better team, and I think they will prove themselves to be a better team. Brendan Sorsby, one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country, has only thrown 2 interceptions. I don't think he maybe throws 1, but I think he would even bounce back off of that and help Cincinnati continue their winning form here in 2025. So yeah, let's go Bearcats. They're on the road to get a nice road win and be in a decent position to compete for a Big 12 title for the first time. Maybe. We'll see. We keep moving now to the second to last conference to talk about the Big 10. Interesting week we had last week. I think we got the Illinois Washington game wrong, and I don't think we missed another game besides that one, if I can remember. So we've been pretty good in picking Big 10 games the last couple of weeks. Even the week before, I think we only missed like 1 or 2. Here for this week in Week 10, we start with Penn State over in Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. Ohio State is favored by 20.5 points. I think that is warranted. The Nittany Lions are without James Franklin. They will be without their starting quarterback, Drew Aller. There's also some defensive injuries that they have suffered earlier in the season. So yeah, there's a lot not going for Penn State here on the road. Ohio State also has a very good quarterback in Julian Sayin, who has been working really well with his wide receiver core. I think we'll see that quite a bit this upcoming weekend. It should be a pretty even contest, I think, in the first half, but the Buckeyes should be pulling away. I'm not too sure if they cover 20.5 points, but Penn State is pretty bad, and I think that's why it's being set there for people putting money on this game. But yeah, we're going to go Buckeyes to win there at home and continue to be undefeated. Rutgers heads over to Champaign, Illinois. And the Fighting Alumni should be bouncing back off of a very, very rough road loss there in Seattle against UW. And yeah, I think it should be a nice bounce back win. Rutgers, very below average here in the Big Ten. Even in games where it's been close for them that they should have won, they just find ways to shoot themselves in the foot. I think they do that here on the road. Illinois is also favored by 12 points, which I think is pretty interesting. I think it's more, it should be more towards like a 7 or 8 number. Because, you know, you never know with Rutgers. But yeah, I think they most likely don't cover there, but do win there against the Scarlet Knights. We move now into Indiana on the road against Maryland. The number 1 team here, Air Sports Outpost. I think they had the best resume so far this season. Maryland, on the other hand, man, it has been a rough 3-4 weeks for the Terps. I think it's going to continue to be a rough weekend for Maryland as Indiana comes to town. One of the best offenses in the country. I think the favorite to win the Heisman, Fernando Mendoza. Even though I really like Dante Moore, but it's unfortunate that the things didn't fall in line. Not only last week, it was kind of a rough week for him, as we're talking about Oregon for some reason now. But here for the Hoosiers, should be business as usual. Their defense is completely lethal, not only in putting pressure on the quarterback, but turning the ball over. Special teams also lethal. We saw that in the game at home against Illinois with that block punt that set up some nice points. Yeah, we should see that here against Maryland. So yeah, let's go Indiana. They're also favored by 22 points, so I think that's very realistic. Next game up, we got Michigan State on the road against Minnesota. Interesting line being set, 3.5 points for the Golden Gophers. Okay. Well, yeah, Minnesota did beat Nebraska. Did unfortunately get blown out by Iowa last week. So I'm a little nervous with this pick. I think out of all the picks, this is the one I'm like, I don't know if it's gonna go our way, even with the Golden Gophers being favored. Because Michigan State, you know, they're in desperation mode. I mean, you can also say that for Minnesota, but definitely for Michigan State. Jonathan Smith, he's also, I guess, in the hot seat. That's been murmurs. I've seen list of him of possibly being fired. Not just this past week, but for the last like 3 to 5 weeks, it's kind of been that way. I think if you lose to Minnesota, yeah, it's definitely not going to help out his situation there. Should be a close one, but I think the Golden Gophers get out alive, even at home, against the Spartans. So yeah, let's go Golden Gophers. Next up, we got Michigan hosting Purdue. We're going to go with Wolverines. Purdue's had some quarterback issues in terms of just health. I'm not too sure if Brown will be able to return this upcoming weekend. So there's another reason why you go for the Wolverines, who were favored by 21 points there in the Big House. And I don't even know the last time Purdue's even won there in Ann Arbor. So yeah, there's a lot of things not going for the Boilermakers. So yeah, let's go Michigan. A final game to talk about. I think it's the only one out of the 6 here in the Big Ten where we're going to go against the grain. Yeah, we're picking Nebraska. They're at home against USC. The Trojans. Well, they haven't been winning a lot of games. In fact, they've only won 1 game so far when they're not playing a Big Ten team, or when they're playing a Big Ten team outside of the West Coast. That was against Purdue earlier this season. So the first 2 seasons so far in their new conference, they have been pretty unsuccessful when they had to travel inland. So there's one reason. And I think this is going to be a massive game for Nebraska. Matt Rule, Jalen Raiola hasn't been looking good the last couple of weeks. And yeah, I mean, they just got out alive against Northwestern, but Northwestern's actually been improving week in and week out. I mean, they beat Penn State, so I mean, like, I guess the team's decent there. But yeah, I think USC, they seem to not travel well. And then on top of that, there has been a decent amount of chatter for the Cornhuskers, who haven't got a ranked win from an AP team. I know USC isn't ranked here at your Sports Outpost because they're not worthy of it. But for your casual, or not even casual voters there in the AP, they for some reason think the Trojans should be ranked, which is what game are you watching there? I know they have beaten Michigan, but who's Michigan beaten? Nobody. So it's like, it's kind of just brand recognition of why certain teams are ranked there in the AP polls. But yeah, back to that 28 game losing streak that the Cornhuskers have had against AP ranked teams. I think it ends, and they get over the hump. I don't know if they'll get back into the mix for a Big Ten title because the favorites are for sure Indiana and Ohio State. But we'll see. We'll see. I think Oregon is kind of that third dog in that race. So it's definitely a long shot. But no, I think Nebraska pulls it off. USC is favored by 6.5 points. I think they're going to have a real physical matchup on their hands that they lose here this weekend. As we keep moving to now the final conference, the Southeastern Conference is what we're going to be talking about next. We start with the biggest game this weekend. It is a top 25 matchup, the only one here at your Sports Outpost occurring, which is kind of a bummer. I wish there was more. Vanderbilt heads to Austin, Texas to take on the Longhorns. And we've kept our pick from earlier this Monday. We have flipped a couple. I'm forgetting which ones we've flipped. I think they're mostly have been in the Big 12. Here in the SEC, we're sticking with our guns with the Commodores, who are not favored, but not by much. The Longhorns have a 2.5 point advantage at the moment in terms of favorability. This is the game I'm going to be definitely tuning into. I'll probably have like the Air Force Army game on the side. But yeah, kind of want to see Diego Pavia when he comes up against this Longhorn defense. I think that's also the reason why Texas is favored. Their defense, it's kind of the reason why they've been winning games or have been close even when they have been losing them. The only two losses is to Ohio State. They're in Columbus, 14-7, holding Ohio State to just 14 points. If you don't think that's impressive, I think you're nuts. And then obviously the loss to Florida, that was just an offensive failure, no doubt about it. And that's, I think, the reason why I think Vanderbilt wins at the end of the day. I think their defense has been punching above their weight, or at least in my eyes, they've been punching above their weight. The win against Missouri last week, they held Missouri to 10 points. They didn't allow Ahmed Hardy to affect that game on the ground. They did get a little lucky with Bo Pipola getting hurt, but there's still Kevin Coleman, Marquise Johnson. Those are some just crazy players in the Southeastern Conference in terms of weapons. The week before, they handled LSU, who on paper has a better roster, from back to front. So they're definitely, again, punching above their weight. They're holding some decent offenses at bay. I mean, the game against Alabama, that was even close. So it's like this team is uber competitive under Clark Lee. I think the force and why that's happening is because of Diego Pavia. And I think he has a great supporting cast there in the running back room, tight end. I'm not too familiar with the wide receivers, but they seem to be getting open somewhat. Even though Diego Pavia's passing stats aren't impressive, it's mostly his, overall contribution from in the air and on the ground. So yeah, we're going pretty somewhat in depth. I kind of wanted to talk about this game a little bit more in depth. I just didn't have time to get into the stats. For Texas, they're just a team that just knows how to get out alive. They did that last week in overtime in Starkville. Like, I thought they were going to lose that game. I was just like, oh, another team goes down there in Mississippi. But the defense, they just know how in moments to just stop whatever's in front of them. And we could see that here. But I think at the end of the day, Vandy just finds a way to win. They know what Texas is good at, and that is on the defensive side. They know Texas's weaknesses in the offensive line, especially at that left guard position. And yeah, I think the Commodores find ways to expose Texas. This game was pretty close last year in Nashville as well. Like, Texas, they almost lost this game. And I think Vandy gets the job done, and that's why we're going with the Commodores. And we keep moving now, as we went pretty in depth there, and somewhat. Georgia versus Florida on a neutral site field. We haven't talked about a neutral site game in a while. But this game between the Bulldogs and the Gators at the largest cocktail party in the world over there in Jacksonville should be a good one, I think. Florida, their first game without Billy Napier. It's going to be pretty interesting to see how the Gators handle that. And then Georgia, on the other hand, they've been all right. It's been okay. I think the game against Alabama kind of rattled them a little bit, but they've been beating pretty good opponents. They have the win against Tennessee. It's kind of their only big win, actually, when I think about it. The other big win they'll have this season will be against Georgia Tech. But here against Florida, it's a pretty decent opponent. They should be pulling away there in the second half. They're favored by 7 points. I don't know. I feel like maybe Florida has it in them to just have that game post firing of their head coach, but also they can be just dog water and just completely fall apart. I think I'm gonna go with the one where they really test Georgia. It's a big rivalry game as well. It's neutral site field. It's technically in the state of Florida. But I think Georgia wins at the end of the day. Next up, we have a bottom of some unfortunate bottom feeders here in the Southeastern Conference between Mississippi State and Arkansas. This game is in Fayetteville. And I think out of all of these, this might be the highest scoring game of the weekend. Mississippi State, they've actually been scoring a decent amount of points. They put up 38 against Texas last week. Not very easy to do, but they have some absolute speed demons out wide. Blake Shapen, he's an all right quarterback. Ever since his move to Starkville when he was over at Baylor, he's been all right. Obviously, last year he suffered a season-ending injury and wasn't even playing in this part of the season. So it's kind of nice to see him be healthy. Arkansas, on the other hand, they have just been playing a lot of teams close. Ole Miss, especially after I think Pittman was there for the Ole Miss game. I think it was after the Notre Dame game where they kind of started to really test teams. Tennessee, Auburn last week where they lost. So it's a team that definitely has been getting themselves into fights. They just have not been winning it. I think they continue to not win there in Fayetteville, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm going to go against the grain. The Razorbacks are favored by 4.5 points. I just think Mississippi State, not that they have, their backs against the wall. I think both of these teams have that situation going on, but I just like what Mississippi State has to offer on offense. So yeah, let's go with the Bulldogs. Next up, we got Ole Miss taking on South Carolina. Gamecocks fans, tough loss last week, as it looked like you were going to get the massive upset against Alabama. That comes up short. Then you have now Cocktober winless. Cockvember seems to be a little bit better in terms of, I guess, current history. I was discussing this with CFB Home in a couple posts interaction there. It's a big account over on X. But yes, South Carolina has been pretty decent in the month of November. How does that crack down against Ole Miss? Well, I mean, it should be an interesting test. I mean, Lenore Sellers doing the Lenore Seller things is just, can he be consistent throughout a game? Probably not against Ole Miss. Because they're going to score a lot of points, I think, on this Gamecocks offense. I think Ole Miss, out of all the teams in the SEC, I think they have the best offense. Now, the defense, on the other hand, they can give up a lot of points as well. So there's a decent chance they get exposed in moments. We saw that last week. In terms of big plays is what I kind of more mean. There was a massive run on the ground. There was, I think, a punt return from Satania, the wide receiver for the Sooners, and then there was another big play. But the defense does know how to also turn things around in terms of turnovers. So I think that's where Ole Miss wins this game. The Rebels are also favored by 12.5 points, and I think at the end of the day they win by either around that or more. So yeah, let's go Rebels. We keep moving to the second to last game to talk about. It's the Hypo Bowl between Oklahoma and Tennessee. They're in Neyland. The last time Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken, played there, they won in Knoxville. That was almost 10 years ago now. This is going to be an interesting game. Probably has a lot of fireworks. I just don't like the situation for the Sooners offense. I've talked about this for countless weeks now. John Mateer, the over-reliance of him. It was a similar vibe that Oklahoma had with Jackson Arnold, and they threw him under the bus. They haven't done it with Mateer yet, but I feel like Sooner fans will eventually get to that point this season. And one of the reasons and the tipping points of Oklahoma fans getting to there is probably this game. I think Tennessee's front end is really going to get after it. Talked about already on social media that I think Mateer is going to have a similar game that he had last year in Boise, Idaho against my Broncos. You know, a very athletic guy. Just a baller. You know, I have a ton of respect for Mateer, but I just think that they have no running game whatsoever. Like, they don't even approach it in like a proper fashion to help out Mateer whatsoever and kind of freeing things up. It's kind of just an over reliance on, you know, plays that kind of are, you know, long passing plays at times. Sometimes it turns into a long pass play because he has to get outside the pocket. And I think that's just where Tennessee is just going to eat him up. If Oklahoma can't run the ball, you know, the Volunteers are just going to have their way. Even though their secondary has been having issues, you know, we have to mention that. We'll talk about some good news for Tennessee fans this upcoming weekend in the secondary. But we'll see if it's even good news. And then Joey Aguilar, I think he's going to have a decent game, but I think it's mostly going to be Tennessee's running attack. Bishop, I think it's it's Sean Bishop. I can't remember the other running back's last name. I think those two guys are going to have a great night against Oklahoma. And that's why we're going to go with Tennessee there at home in Neyland. The next game and the final game we're going to talk about for the stream is Kentucky at Auburn. Two teams that have not been winning much of anything here in the SEC. Auburn, I believe, got their first win last week against Arkansas. And I believe Kentucky has been winless. The Wildcats, I think their most impressive loss here in the SEC. Well, I think they've had quite a few. The Texas overtime one in Lexington earlier this season, also in Lexington. Ole Miss had to score enough points to beat them, and that's actually the game where Austin Simmons went down. So they've been competitive somewhat. You know, they got their cheeks handled against Georgia, cheeks handled last week against Tennessee. Is that the same case here against Hugh Freeze's Tigers? Maybe. I think it's going to kind of be similar to the game last week that Auburn had against Arkansas, where, you know, Kentucky gets up early, but then Auburn somehow, some ways finds the magic to get another Southeastern Conference win. I think it's, you know, a little bit of a must win. You know, you definitely want to be bowl eligible. Hugh Freeze will definitely get fired if Auburn doesn't make a bowl. But yeah, I mean, he's going to have to coach his ass off this upcoming weekend to get this win against Kentucky, who should be, you know, somewhat tricky. Dowdell, like, where has he been this season? I know he had an all right game against Toledo, but since his transfer from Nebraska over there, seems like it has not worked out well. Quarterback situation, I know they have had to switch up quarterbacks. I'm not too sure if that's completely improved. They got, you know, I don't know if they got completely blown out. I know it was about 3 possessions between them, the Volunteers, but we'll see. I think this is going to be one of the closest games this weekend, similar to the Texas Vanderbilt game. But I think at the end of the day, Auburn wins. That's going to wrap it up, guys, for our quick picks. That was all 52 games to talk about here in week 10. Here again are the bye teams.